Hello, viewers and subscribers. This is the Geo Scholar here, and I tried live streaming on my laptop twice. No sound, so I'm gonna live stream here from my phone. And anybody who comes in, if you can hear me or can't hear me, please let me know in the chat. I'm gonna put in live chat. And in fact, I'm going to share this. I tweeted that I'm hoping more people will come into the stream. And as I introduced myself before, this channel is the Geo Scholar. In my last video, I spoke about Great Migration in particular. This is possibly the largest migration of African Americans out of the Southeast into regions such as the Northeast, the urban Midwest, the Western United States, and it came in several waves. And about that in my last live stream, and I talked about the pull factors and the push factors for which many African Americans needed to leave the Southeast United States between 1910 and 1970. And then I also mentioned a migration back to the South, in particular to places such as Atlanta, Charlotte, Nashville, Orlando, Raleigh, those areas. This migration that I'm about to talk about, you notice in the title, it's Exodusters. And if you look at, a little thumbnail, I have a little plat, a little map of the town of Nicodemus, Kansas. I'm going to get to why I put that there. But I wanted to talk about the Exodus movement, the Exoduster movement, or the Exodusters. Now, I'm going to give you a little background on this. It's the end of the Civil War. The Southeast basically ravaged from war. The Southeast is, the Southeast basically got pretty much all of its economy before then from slavery and from the plantation economy. And now you have a situation where the economy has changed for the worst. The Civil War has basically dealt a big blow. And black people who had been slaves pretty much for that time are now free. They're free. They're free to make their own decisions, be part of society, vote. But there is a lot of resentment and a lot of resistance to this. There were many people, there are a lot of people who had been taught with this mindset of black people were to be looked down on and they were not to be part of society. And this coming the slavery economy, because slaves were not even allowed to know how to read. Now you have people who are free, and then you're basically now there are a lot of racial tensions going on in the South during the 1860s and 1870s. And African Americans are facing a lot of terrorism, they're facing resistance, they're facing violence, they're facing a lot of bigotry. And it was during the 1870s that the Jim Crow laws would start. But during the 1860s, 1870s, there was a lot of terrorist activity. The Ku Klux Klan, let's call the Ku Klux Klan what they are, a terrorist organization. And with all of this terrorism, there is your push factor. I talked about push factor in my last video about the Jim Crow laws in the South and all the terrorism and the bigotry and the racism going on in the South. That's a push factor right there. That was a push factor. Basically, it pushed some African Americans to just leave the South. And then there's another push factor. In addition to all the terrorism and all the bigotry that was going on in the South, the economy was devastated. At this point, most black people living in the South were poor. And they were living in situations where they literally couldn't own money. Majority of black Americans did not own a home. Majority were not in any kind of condition to compete economically. You know, you had the grinding poverty and just a dire economic situation in the South during the 1870s. You know, just the poverty. That was another push factor that pushed many black Americans out of the South. And, what's going on? Oh. But you have this migration, this is the first migration out of the South after the Civil War. And this migration was not going strictly to the north, albeit there were some places that were definitely further north than where many black Americans were coming from. But they were, this migration, the Exodus migration of black Americans going from, leaving the South, they're going to the Great Plains. Give you an idea of what I'm talking about. There's the United States of America. Here it is. You have people from the South. And they're going westward. They're going to places such as Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado. They're going to these areas. Many people are going westward. I don't know if Horace Greeley said this himself or if he paraphrased it, but he said, "Go west, young man, and grow with the country." And I think with the Exodusters leaving the southeast, going for points westward, such as Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and the like, and Colorado even, I think that westward, and especially Kansas, was a big destination. But I think the movement of African Americans going westward during the late 1870s and especially 1879, when you had the Exodus of 1879, when you had this going on, I think there, that whole thing of go west and grow with the country, I think for African Americans who had been bound to the plantations in the South, I think many took that to heart and went west, and especially to points like Oklahoma and Kansas. And some even went as far west as New Mexico. I'll get into that in a moment, but there was certainly, I'm showing you this map, and I'm going to get into why, I mentioned push factors. There are some pull factors to consider. Notice that I say the term Exoduster, it comes from Exodus. The book of Exodus, when it talks about, the Jews that were in Egypt, and they're leaving out of Egypt, they're leaving captivity in Egypt, and they're going to the promised land. And that there are so many comparisons being made to that. Comparisons of African Americans who had been in, captivity, who had been in slavery in the South, and many African Americans looked at points westward, going towards Kansas and Oklahoma as, the promised land. This feeling of, we're going westward. That's the promised land out there. And, that's a pull factor. It's like that pulls people to go out there. The specter of, there's land out there. You're going to get treated better out. It's not going to be perfect, but it's certainly going to be better than where you're currently at that time. That's sort of the pull factor. And then there's something else. Some African Americans that had been newly freed, some had thought about, let's go to Liberia. And there were certainly some that did go to Liberia, but most were not going to do that. Let me show you something. Simple point logistics. Here is the United States. There's Liberia. Liberia is right here. And as you can see, that is quite a journey across the ocean. Quite a journey that most people couldn't afford. And it was a long logistics. It was just the logistics of that journey were hard to deal with. And just the cost to go out there was not something many people could deal with. And so it was a lot cheaper to just go to Kansas or go to Oklahoma. Now I think with why several, like thousands of African Americans went to Kansas. Well, this is what I see. You have the Mississippi River right here. You have the mighty Mississippi. The mighty Mississippi River snaking its way past Missouri, Tennessee, Mississippi, down Louisiana. You look at that river just snaking its way down. And many of the Exodusters had migrated from areas that were east of the Mississippi River, but close to the Mississippi River. And one thing to understand about the Mississippi River, this is like a highway. This is literally like, rivers were like highways. You had steamboats going up and down the Mississippi River. And one thing about it, there was one major destination people were headed to, St. Louis. St. Louis, why here? Why St. Louis, of all places? Well, if you could catch a steamboat to St. Louis, Missouri, well, remember, the Mississippi River is not the only river in the state of Missouri. But you take the Mississippi River, and then it joins the Missouri River. It joins the Missouri River, and the Missouri River snaking through central Missouri, snaking through the capital of Missouri, Jefferson City. The capital of Missouri is Jefferson City, not St. Louis, not Kansas City. Had to throw in a little Had to be a little hard there. But you've got the Missouri River snaking through here, and the Missouri River comes to Kansas City. And forms the border and forms part of the border between Missouri and Kansas. You see how it goes up to Leavenworth, Kansas. So I'm thinking about the geography here. You think about the geography of migration. There were many Exodusters who got stranded, though. Many, you were thinking, why go up through? Here's the thing: you could take a steamboat from St. Louis and end up in Kansas. And that's why many had stopped in St. Louis. But here's one of the things to consider. Many steamboat captains, many did not want to take passengers to Kansas. And there were many who ended up stranded in St. Louis. And with some charitable organizations, particularly from St. Louis's black population itself, and from Quakers and from other organizations, many people were able to get help so they could go out to Kansas. And could go out to places like Kansas, Oklahoma, and Nebraska. But I think about that migration. You think about that for a moment. And then you think about why people go to places, what are the pull factors, what are the push factors. Many people, many African Americans during the late 1870s were going to Oklahoma and Kansas and Nebraska, and some went to Colorado. Many people were leaving because of the really hostile social climate that was in the South and the grinding poverty that was in the South. There were some, I'm going to show you a few places. I put in a plat of the town of Nicodemus. I'm going to show you something. That's Nicodemus, Kansas. That is the historical site. Well, actually, I'll show you the historical site of. Actually, Nicodemus, Kansas was a town founded by black people who had migrated out of the South, and they had gone to Kansas. They had gone to Kansas, and to give you an idea where Nicodemus is located, that's up in slightly northwest Kansas. Somewhere in Graham County, Kansas. Show you another town out west founded by black people. This is Deerfield, Colorado, or rather what is remaining of it. Some black people had gone out west and had founded towns. Some still live on, such as Langston, Oklahoma. Oh, by the way, Langston, Oklahoma is home to the only historically black college slash university west of the Mississippi River. No, not west. No, it's not. The other one west of the Mississippi River is Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri. I got it wrong. But this is the only one in Oklahoma, I think. But then, no, actually, this is the furthest west. This is Langston, Oklahoma. This is a town that was founded by black people who were moving west. And then I'm going to Bully, Oklahoma. And that is actually one of the things that had come out of the Exodus, of the first Exodus out of the South. Many black people that had gone and founded, many people who had left, who had gone west or went west, went to go settle. Many remained poor, some founded towns. There is also a town in New Mexico that was founded by black settler Blackdom. I think that one's gone now, but you certainly had a history of black pioneers who, or I would say, you could say they're pioneers in their own right. Never mind, I was trying to find the town of DeWitt, Nebraska. It was a town founded by blacks who had moved westward. But one of the things that had taken place, Kansas had a very rapid increase in its black population during this time. Many black people who had left the South, they went to Kansas. Many had gone to Oklahoma. And you had this migration of people going west for many reasons. And one of the big reasons why many black people were leaving the South during the 1870s to go west, to places like Kansas, Oklahoma, Colorado, Nebraska. No, wait, that's Colorado, that's Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma. People were going west. And they were going west. This was perceived to be the promised land. It was perceived, and many people were trying to leave a very hostile social climate behind. Many were trying to leave the grinding poverty behind. And, one of the things about migration in its nature is geographic, because you have people who are trying to leave one place and go to another. You have to think about it. Movement of things, movement of people, it is geographic. You think about, I mentioned in my last video about the push and pull factors about African Americans going to northern cities such as Chicago, Detroit, New York. And I also showed, some of the transportation geography involved like the railroads, for instance, and sort of the roads that go to places, like Chicago. There are many push and pull factors that, you know, people leave and go to certain places. The same can be applied with the Exodusters, people who are trying to find a better way for themselves at this time. And many, some people found success, many people remained poor, some some towns were founded, and some of the, there were a couple of towns that were founded. Some have remained, like Boley, Oklahoma, Langston, Oklahoma, and then some towns have sort of, are known, have become ghost towns because, you have events like the Great Depression. You come on hard times, you come on the Dust Bowl, and then people leave to go find work elsewhere. Another push and pull factor right there. But, to really think about this, think about people going west, and especially African Americans who wanted to go west, to find what they would perceive to be a better place for themselves, a place where they could be freer than they would be where they were living at the time. And, you know, it goes it goes to show you a very big role geography can play and how geography plays itself out in migration. And that's all I gotta say about that. If you like this video, be sure to check out other videos on this channel, and be sure to hit that like button and subscribe.